Hello, crafters. I have a problem I need to solve. And I'm sure many of you have had this same problem or have it right now, is that I've been making and creating lots of things lately, but I have so many scraps left over. And even my container that I keep just bits and pieces of my scraps is exploding. So how do I fix it? How do I make it better, and how can I make it easier to use up these scraps instead of grabbing that new piece of cardstock each time I want to craft? Well, I'm going to share a few tips and tricks to what I do when my stash gets my scrap stash gets a little overwhelming. I take a day, take some time out, and start sorting through it. So the first thing that I would do, I'll pull my cards out from my stash that I have made previously. Okay, so I would start sorting them by decorative and plain cardstock, and then by size, because you want to be able to make the most of the scrap pieces that you have available. So go through your stash and sort them into piles of different sizes. That will help us lead in to tip number 1. Okay, so you have your piles separated and ready to go. Even just sorting through, separating your plain cardstock from your decorative cardstock really helps you just clear your mind and be able to focus on what to do next. So we're going to start with our plain cardstock. So we'll pop our pile of decorative cardstock and embellishments to the side, and we'll come back to that a bit later. So with our plain cardstock, we have got lots of small strips, which are great to add sentiments on, stamp sentiments to add to your cards, or even your art journals or your scrapbook pages. So what I would recommend with your strips like this is keeping them in a storage box so they're all together. Have it clearly labelled so you know that that's where you go to grab when you just need a sentiment strip. And I have a great little box. It's a flip lid box, which I will go through and teach you how to make later on. So we can pop those strips aside, and then you can separate them into colours if you wanted to as well. The longer strips aren't going to fit in the box that we made, so you can either cut that in half or you can just keep that in your pile. Okay, so we'll separate our black and our white. And we're looking for some nice big pieces, because that's going to enable us to create what we need to next, to really make the most of our scrap stash. So you can see I have lots of different projects and cards that you tend to, like when you start something, you just, so much easier just to start from a new piece of cardstock, especially when you look at your scrap stash and it's just stuff everywhere. And it's really hard to manage in your head knowing, what do I do with it? It just becomes too overwhelming. So it's a great way in doing this, is just helping you to relax your mind and help you to feel a bit more organised when you come to doing your crafting. Okay, so it's probably not necessary to separate your colours if you don't want to. I like to. It makes it feel better for me, just to feel a bit more clearer with what I'm doing. But I use a lot of white and black as my bases or as mats behind things, so I like to have them in their own little section. Okay, couple more sentiment strokes. All right, so now we are going to grab out our largest pieces, because what you can do with the larger pieces that you have is pre-make your card bases, as well as making your mats that you can either put on as a photo mat for a scrapbook page if you're more of a scrapbooker, or a card mat to add to the front of your cards, which you can then go and emboss with an embossing folder, which you could do today and have those ready to go. So it's a quick and easy process to grab the things out that you need to create your cards. So go ahead and grab those really large pieces of cardstock that you may have in your stash. Pop those, and we're going to make some card bases. So I have a couple of sizes that I work with when I'm doing my card bases, well, 3 really. So you've got your 6x6, so you would cut your papers down to 6x12 and then score them at 6 inches to create your card base. You can cut it at 4 inches by 12 inches, and that creates a top folding note card. And then you have the 8.5 by 5 7/8, which is your standard size for an Australian C6 card. Okay, so let's cut some down and create some card bases so they're ready to go. So what do we have here? So this one's a little less than 4 inches, so we can pop that aside and use that for something else. Same with that one. And that one. Same with that one. This one, we definitely could do that. Okay. So 4 inches. Okay, you've still got that strip. Don't get rid of that. Keep that to the side. And then you can fold this over to create our first note card. So even if this paper's got a little mark on it, it's a bit hard to see in the camera anyways, but don't worry about any marks like that on your card, because remember, you can add something over the top to create your finished card. So you don't need to waste Okay, so this one might cut at 6 inches. Okay, now it is completely up to you. This is quite thin, what's left over. You could still use it and add it into your strip stash because that would look quite cool as a belt around a card, or even just something to line up a sentiment underneath. Just use common sense when it is to keeping things. So if you know that you are likely to use it, then keep it. If not, you know, don't hold on to it. Okay, so I could use the scoreboard as well to do that, but just to save time at the moment to show you what I'm doing. So we've created our 6x6 and our note card, and I've got a couple more note cards that are already cut at 4 inches, so that makes it easy. Here we go. This one's a little under 6 inches, so that one, nope, just can't measure it properly. We'll cut that one at 6 inches. Oops. That's better. Here we go. This one's the same. And then this one here, this is long enough. We'll cut this one down at 8 1/4 by 5 7/8. Then, oh, this is your standard Australian size C6 card. There we go. So there's a little bit of a watermark on that. So even though this is the smooth side, I would turn that over knowing that that's what I would cover up. And a little tip to add on the inside, being that it's now textured, it'd be hard to write on, but what you could do is grab a piece of printer paper and create an insert. So just grab that. So we're going to cut that at 5 7/8 on the long side, and then 8 inches folding that in half, and then opening it out and putting the tape on. Now, if this is like a card that you want to use for a card swap, you could just put a little bit of tape in the middle so it's easy to take out, and then the card can be reused or kept just as a piece of artwork. Otherwise, you can go all the way across that score line, but you want to try and get it right onto that score line. So you would just adjust the printer paper size to whatever size card that you were doing. but cutting it in that way, I did get that measurement wrong, didn't I? So it should be 5 5/8, not 5 7/8, because that's the height of the card. Okay, so 5 5/8 by 8 inches. Adding that in right along the score line. And you have a beautiful insert ready to write on, and then whoever receives it will be able to easily remove that, just like so, to use the card again. There we go. This is a quick and easy insert for your card. So then just adjust that size to whatever size card that you're making. But the C6 size, you can see that you can get 2 inserts from one piece of A4 paper, so it's quite economical. Okay, so I'll keep going through these and making my card bases, and then I will come back. And we'll keep going on to the next tip. So, out of the larger pieces of cardstock that I had in my stash, I was able to make a good mix of card bases ready to use. It's a great way of being prepared and being ready, because sometimes we really need to make a card for a birthday or a sympathy card or thank you, and we just don't feel enthused to start from scratch and pull everything out to create that card. But doing these and spending a session going through your scraps and creating all of these is going to enable you to feel more prepared and ready to go, and will make it easier just to grab what you need. Now, if you have something available like a small magazine folder, and there are plenty of YouTube videos out there showing you how to make those and create them with chipboard, you can do those yourself if you feel so inclined, or just a plastic container from a cheap shop that you have around you, or Great or Kmart or Target, whatever. And Couture Creations even have a card keeper now, which is a great way of looking after your cards. So you can have one for your pre-made cards and ones that are ready to go to give out, and then ones with all of your stash in it, ready to make them into cards to give away. Okay, so tip 1, card bases. We've got that. So the next tip out of like the next largest pieces that you have is to create card mats or photo mats ready to go on the front of your cards, and that you can stamp on, emboss on, use them just as the background to have the card front that you have worked on, that you may have inked up and stamped and created your piece of artwork to add to the front of the card. You might like to use the plain cardstock just as a border. So to do those, there's a number of different sizes, so it really just depends on the card fronts that you've made and the size of your border that you like. So I quite like to have about 1/8 of an inch border, so I take 1/4 of an inch off my cardstock. But if you want a slightly smaller border, which can work really well as well, you're going to have to adjust the size to do that. So I'll go through and cut mine. I will list up on your screen the measurements that I've used for the different mats that I've created, and put the information in the description as well. So have a look and have fun creating your mats. card bases and our mats cut at the different sizes to suit what cardstock I had, the ones that I'd cut out previously, ready to go for on top of our cards. So it's a great way, like, separating your colors, especially from your white, because if you use a lot of inks and stamping with your card fronts and blending and things like that, you want to be able to keep your white closer and available to you, so you grab those instead of cutting more out, and then the rest of them can be used to add on as mats. So even just doing those two things, creating our card bases and cutting up the mats, our pile of scraps has diminished quite a lot, and it just becomes a lot easier to manage. And I'll bring in the scrap that I have of the plain cardstock. So this one here is a card base of a shutter card that I did in a class. I don't remember how it all works and fits together. It goes that way somehow, in like that. No, this way. Like that. There we go. Okay, so any ones that special ones too, you can add to your pre-cut card bases, so they're ready to use as well. But then out of all of that, from the plain cardstock, we'll get to the decorative, that's all we have left. Now, like I said, with the sentiment strips, especially out of your white and your black, but you could keep your other colours as well to do an embossing for your sentiments to add on to your cards. You can keep those in a box, and then the rest of these bits and pieces, what I'd recommend is start die cutting. Just grab out whatever shapes that you have and any sentiments. They are a great way to do it, and you can create some layered dies. So cut out multiples of the one die and then add them and stick them together, and you're creating your own embellishments as you go along. So that's what you can do with what you have left, but it makes it a lot easier to manage. So with the decorative cardstock, the larger pieces, what we would do is cut out the mats like I had done just with the plain cardstock, and then again with what is left you would die cut. Just go ahead and die cut a heap of shapes and pieces, whatever you have available to you. It's great to even cut out some of your nesting die shapes and have them ready to go to add to your projects. Just have some fun and enjoy creating out of your scraps and bringing those down into a more manageable, useful tool for you in your craft room. Okay, so once you have cut everything out, done all your die cutting, where are you going to put them? So that is something that I wanted to show you how to make. So what I have created, like I showed you earlier, was some flip top boxes, and these are ones that I add my embellishments in. So this is the Minte Nightfall collection, the embellishment pack, the die cut pack that came with that. I've just added what I have left into this little box to use up, and it's just easy to grab off the shelf because I know what it is, and it's safe and secure. So these aren't probably the best to travel with unless you've got somewhere harder to protect them, but they're great to have up on your bookshelf to have all of your bits and pieces. So that's why I'm saying like your strip sentiments. So you could have a stamping session and actually stamp a heap of sentiments ready to go. This one says birds and feathers, and I've got different feathers. I think I've got a couple of birds in there. Things that I've die cut previously out of one of the dies that we've had, and these ones are some pre-cut feathers from an embellishment pack or ephemera pack that is from Couture Creations. So it's a great way to keep everything safe and secure, and it helps you to be organised in your craft room. So to create these ones, you will need, for the large one we'll start with, you will need a 12 by 12 piece of cardstock, and on one side you need to score at 1.5 inches, 5 1/4, 6 3/4, and 10 1/2. Rotate the paper on your scoreboard and score at 1.5 and at 10 1/2. When you have done that, on these tabs here, you'll need to cut those out. So we're going to cut each of the tabs just along the score line, and also just tape in each of the edges just slightly. You don't want to take too much off, but it just makes assembling the box lots easier. Okay, so I cut this middle out. Taper off the edge. And so you can do this out of any papers that you want, and you could also decorate them like I had done with the Nightfall one. You can add papers so you know what's in them, or you can just leave them plain and then have a label on the front or the side depending on how you're storing them on or in your craft room, on your desk, or on a bookshelf. Just having things nice and close and easy to access makes crafting just a little bit more relaxing instead of feeling like you have to clean up before you get started. So I do this every few months. It's not something that I do every week. It's just when my scrap pile, I'm obviously not using it well enough, and it's getting a little overwhelming. So just whenever you need to, jump in there and start creating and cutting out and die cutting. So it's a way to be crafty without getting too messy and a great way to get organised. So to finish off the box, just going to fold over and burnish all of those score lines. So this paper here is, if you're wondering, is 270 GSM. It's the House of Paper Kaleidoscope Black, but a 250 GSM, it works just as well, but if you want to have that extra strength, then you can go to the 300 or even 400 GSM will work really well for these boxes. So it just depends on what you have available. But you can always get any House of Paper products through us. If we don't have it in stock, you can just ask us to order it in, and we'd be happy to do that for you. So then, to assemble the box, having these flaps out, these flaps here, and I'm adding the X on so you can see because of the black. is where you're going to put the tape on. So I would recommend using a score tape or just a stronger tack tape to tape those on. So you're going to add the tape, sticking it on like here, so you can fold this section back so you can create the base of your box, and then you would stick that on there to create the flip top lid. And then you have a beautiful storage box ready to add your strips or your die cuts, and adding a label on the front or the side. You can decorate the box or not, it's up to you. So I've made quite a few. Most of them I have at home. Here is my Stamperia one, but I have just my Stamperia embellishments in, ready to add to projects. And I've done that just out of a grey cardstock because that's what I had in my stash. And then this one is my Mintate one, where I didn't decorate that at all, but just did the writing on the front. And then I've got my Mintate embellishments ready to go. So I've got some that need to be fussy cut out, some that have been fussy cut, ready to add to projects. But it's a great way of just keeping things together, ready to use on any of your projects. If you're a card maker, scrapbooker, art journaler, mixed media artist, whatever you want to have, these are a great way to store anything, and easy to make. So you can make them in different sizes as well. So these two are made from a 6x12 piece of paper, both of them. Just this one was done on a 1-inch scale, and this one's a 1.5-inch scale. So I'll add those measurements for the extra boxes down in the description. So take a look and have fun creating and cleaning up your stash of scrap cardstock, so you can make the most of what you have and have a neater, tidier craft room, if that's possible, because mine's a mess. But it does help, and it does make you feel better and feel useful using up those scrap bits of paper that you may have forgotten about, and use up everything that you have around you. So I hope you have enjoyed using up your scrap stash and learning these tips and tricks on what to do with them, and to help you get a little bit more organised. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.